I'm really looking forward to this next panel that we have. Will Madrigal, if you want to come up and panelist, please join us on the stage. Will is going to serve as our convener for this panel, and Will Madrigal is the Tribal Capacities and Partnership Manager with the Climate Science Alliance, and he'll moderate the panel of tribal practitioners and agency resource managers discussing cultural fire practices and perspectives of Southern California. So thank you, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Achama, as we say in our Cahuilla language, which is one of many hundreds of languages that were spoken here. And I don't know if you caught that great quote from Dr. Sam Rodriguez, who's one of our Kumeyaay elders and fire practitioners and teachers, is that one thing is you've probably heard this before: fire is sacred to Native people. But then he also said, it's who we are. And I really, really hope that everyone can hear that and gets to understand that in the future, because that's, as our panelists are coming up today, I feel very honored to be up here and to be able to open up the floor to these leaders, these knowledge keepers, these people who have a strong fire burning inside of them to serve their community in their various ways. And myself, I work for the Climate Science Alliance as the Tribal Capacities and Partnership Manager. And I'm also Native, Iwiyuatem, Cahuilla, and Payamkowish, Luceño. And I grew up on the Cahuilla Indian Reservation, not far from the Thomas Burn in Riverside County. And I currently reside on the Palma Indian Reservation, which is one of 6 reservations on the 76 Highway in North San Diego County. And so I'm very happy to be here to, again, continue the conversation that was started earlier. Conversation about Indigenous perspective and where that fits and all the networking, inner workings, and framework of the agencies that are represented here today. And so I'd like to also acknowledge the Native folks here in the audience. Thank you for staying here and supporting us, and I hope that you've made some worthwhile connections today in relationship building, because I believe that that's the key to the future of our environment, but also the people, right? We are very much intertwined as Native people. We always are told and taught by our elders that we are the land is us, to put it simply. What does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about that today. That's why we have assembled this panel. So thank you to the California Wildlife and Forest Resilience Task Force for having this session. Again, this is a continuation of conversations I think that we've been having for a long time. But I think we could, after this and during this conversation, we could make some real headway into doing more and doing our part as far as creating these long-term relationships that will help sustain the work that we're doing, because it isn't easy, right, people? It takes a lot of strength, emotion, and resilience. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our panel to introduce themselves, starting with Chief West.
How's that? Can everybody hear me? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wesley Roos Jr., the Tribal Fire Chief of the La Jolla Reservation Fire Department, also a tribal member. And as Will says, yeah, fire is a part of it. It's been a part of my life for coming up 65 years. I've been in the fire service for 44 years now, as well as the EMS side too. So it is my life, and it's going to continue till that last day. And so that's what we're working on, is, bringing that fire back to the land as it used to be, where it lived and thrived, and in a controlled condition, of course. And it's going to take a little while, but we'll get there. Thank you.
Mi yam notang Marlena Dusakeka, nun payom kuisham pi kumiai pi kupa. Hello, my name is Marlena Dusek. I come from the Payom Kuisham, Kumeyaay, and Kupa people. All 3 of those tribes make up the greater so-called San Diego County area. First, I come as an Indigenous woman, cultural practitioner, gatherer, weaver, food producer. And second, I just recently got hired as the Indigenous Stewardship Coordinator for the Climate Science Alliance. I'm also a cultural burner. For me, it's really important that we get our women and our out there back on our lands, managing and taking our traditional roles that as we always have had. And so I'm just very grateful to be here today and have a lot of conversations with a lot of these agency folks who are in the room today about how we can support cultural burners further and create less bureaucracy and red tape for us to do what we need to do, and quite quickly, because we all know we're in a state that we really need to work with one another to really get going on the mismanaged land that we've seen since settlers arrived here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Soland. I'm very humbled to be up here on this panel speaking today. I'm very honored to be speaking on behalf of Cliff Devers and the Palma Band of Mission Indians. I do note, should note, I am not a tribal member nor a tribal person, but we're quite closely with Palma and primarily do a lot of grant writing, project management, and helping the tribe in any way I can.
Hauka, Enya Emily Bergenio, Nechuhi, Matas Konan Kopai, Napum Sinau Kutun Kopai, Enya Pipa, Napum Hef me up anyway. So hello everybody, my name is Emily Bergenio. I come from the Esponan village, also known as the San Isabel Reservation in North County, San Diego. I also come from the Sinau Kutun village, which is the Manzanita Band of the Kumeyaay Nation on my father's side, which is in East County, San Diego. And they are 2 of 12 federally recognized Kumeyaay bands here in San Diego County. We also have 6 villages in northern Baja California, Mexico, as the border split our nation physically, but not culturally. I'm an auntie first, and I am a newly appointed chairwoman for the Kumeyaay Digueño Land Conservancy. I also am a cultural practitioner, which includes fire and many other components of our life ways. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? I want to thank the tribes for allowing us to be here, especially the Lucenio. I'm Travis Armstrong. I'm a senior environmental scientist for CAL FIRE. I twice was a regional archaeologist, including for San Diego. Between those, I was curator of Native American cultures at UCLA, and I've worked for 4 tribes in Southern California, including Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and then before that, the tribal archaeologist from Morongo. I'm an enrolled member of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, Minnesota, and my father was a fire practitioner, and now my brothers are.
Hey, Joel, you're last. You grab that one, yeah.
Miyam, Nutung Jo Ariana Yoka, Yokium, Wabichum Pitopmanium, Pumtungi, Non Payam Kuishpi, Ibu, Non Auk, Aquatamakungai, Pete, Chatungai. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joel Ariano. I am happy to sit up here, the last minute invitation to crash and sit on the end of the table and add in. I'm
gonna do it without you.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Pechanga Band, and I currently work with the Climate Science Alliance as the Indigenous Land Stewardship Specialist. I am also, as previous speakers have mentioned, I'm a traditional practitioner. I am an instructor, cultural instructor for our youth and my community in our traditional plant sciences and hunting. So I hold those knowledges and carry them as a student. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Mr. Novik, thank you. So these folks that are sitting behind me here, these are my teachers, and like I said, they have imparted knowledge to our communities and led our communities to understand the problems that are at hand, especially when looking at our world and our environment and the loss of our resources. And how do we approach that? Well, we approach that the same way we have for generations, since time immemorial. But for the better part of a couple thousand years, we've been here thriving, and we've been recognizing the changes in our environment. We have unique approaches. Each tribe, each region has their own approaches to that. And so one of the first things that we'd like to address today too is this concept of indigenous fire. I like to call it good fire, because when I was growing up, and like many of you, watching those Smokey the Bear commercials, and kind of just thinking of how devastating wildfire is, right? That's the message, right? And it's true. However, he left out the whole part about indigenous fire and cultural fire, because he would have said, if only you can prevent forest fires. But there is good fire, except good fire, right? Because that good fire has sustained our communities for thousands and thousands of years. And it's just, within the last 250 years, we've been outlawed. And, that's the best way to describe it. Outlawed from practicing those fireways, bringing fire back onto the land to replenish and renew. So I want to open that up to the panelists. I want to allow them to express and to emphasize and focus the need for good fire and why it's so important today.
Yes, so with that, as Will said, those practices were taken away from us years and years ago, as well as numerous other things with that were practiced and they weren't taught. So there's a big gap there that's missing. So so what we're trying to do is close that gap again and bring back the good fire, whatever you want to call it, type of fire back to the lands. And then it'll get away from, the catastrophic fires eventually. And I spent my career, suppressing fire. That's what I was doing, suppressing fire all along and doing prescribed fire, on a small percentage otherwise. But it was for different reasons. It wasn't truly for the land. It was for, fire management, I think Megan talked about it earlier this morning about the fuel break systems and whatnot. Spent, hours, thousands of hours and days putting in fuel break and burning every year. But that's all I was doing it for. So, it's time to change that. Now that I'm not with the Forest Service and I'm retired, I'm home now. And that's how I see it. I'm home now. I can do more. I can do something for my people and those around us, even the land that we no longer reside on that used to be ours. So that's what we're working towards. It's bringing back that. It's going to take a while. We had to save the trees, as we saw the video there too, the trees, the plants, the animals, it all works together, that big circles we talk about. So, that's what we're working towards.
Thank you, Chief. Marlena. Just kind of good fire, what it means to you.
Yeah, so I think for me, and a lot of us up here, we've been around fire since we were born. We're experts. We didn't learn it when we were older. I mean, we may be reclaiming some stuff now, just because of settler colonialism, but a lot of us have been around fire our whole life. And when we say cultural fire, it's not a monolith. We're not just talking about burning of the land, even though it is essential. We're also talking about cultural fire for our ceremonies, for our traditional cooks, for our food, for our pottery, for Topanish or Pion, our gambling game that we play. Fire is in everything that we do. It's not just cultural burning. And just like Matao, Andrew's amazing film that he's working on, he explains that even in our languages. And that's what's really critical. The fire is within us. That means that's a relationship that you cannot separate human from. You cannot separate our wildlife. You cannot separate our relatives from. It's a critical healing that we all need. And so for myself, I said this before, but it's really important that we start actually supporting our cultural and traditional bearers and not creating that red tape for us to be able to do what we need to do now, today. Because what we're seeing on is that it's easier for these agencies to get out and burn. It's easier for private landowners to get out and burn. But for the tribes, it's very difficult. There's a lot of permitting and things that takes a very long time for us to be able to get out and do what we need to do, especially on our allotments in the reservation as families. So it's pretty critical that we also get our women back into these roles as traditional land managers as well, because that was taken away from us from settler colonialism and patriarchy. And that's what we see, especially on these fire crews. I have my FFT too. I often am on fire crews, and I'm the only woman, or I'm the only Native woman. And I think it's critical that we do have our fire crews, our Native fire crews out there helping, but I also think it's critical that we get our community members and cultural bearers who don't have these NWCG qualifications or aren't interested in doing that. And so how do we do that for our people, and how are we able to bring that good fire back so we protect all of our communities?
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you, Marlena. And what everybody's been saying is like, it starts with relationship building. It starts with a relationship based on due diligence, right? We all know what that means. But for Native people, you know, we'd like you to know something about us before you approach us, before you make that phone call, before you write that email. Try to do your own research. There's a lot of resources out there, just on tribal websites alone. It's easy to go on the web now and figure out who territory you're in, you know, and what are some of the tribes and the tribal websites as resources that you can access. So, so that's what we'd like you to do, and moving forward to continue to ask those questions too about our history, about why we do certain things on the land. I want to now go over to Emily, if you would like to impart some your idea of cultural fire, why it's important, and some of the relationships that you've had that have been both positive and a hindrance as well.
So just wanted to say thank you to the organizers for this. I had to be asked, or I had to ask to be on this panel, you know, so that should just show you that we still have to, you know, ask or prioritize ourselves really in these spaces, no matter, you know, the growth, you know, of these agencies. This is the lived experience of that coin, the other side of that coin, which is I'm up here because I asked to be up here. So thank you for the organizers to allowing me to talk. And I just wanted to reflect, because they're talking about good fire. Kind of everyone in this room just reflect about the systems in which we stand on and benefit from, whether it's, you know, with the state. As we all know, the state was founded, you know, on the genocide of the people here. And that's what you guys are standing on, unfortunately, you know. It doesn't mean we have to continue that practice. It means that we can learn from it and do better as individuals, as the current land stewards of these areas, whether it's with, you know, the agency, state, federal, or local, or tribal. So I just want to acknowledge like why we're even here today, which is the systematic of it all, the systems. But that's another conversation, more in-depth conversation. And for us, Kumeyaay, the fire was given to us with the from the Creator. So it's always been a sacred element, or what I like to call relative. So that's how we've always approached it, was with a space of sacredness and not the sense of fear as we all kind of understand it now when talking about wildfires or even fire in general. And so even with our death ceremony, we have fire to traditionally we cremate our loved ones, and we do that ourselves. We don't send that individual out. And it's to show you that we honor them with fire. And there's, you know, that whole process and what that means, and the significance and how it correlates with our creation, or what we know as the start of these lands. But so I mentioned, yeah, the fire as a relative, because it is a symbiotic relationship that we have with the water, with the plants, with with everything. As the relatives before us mentioned, this area, San Diego, is known for being the most biodiverse areas, and I often hear it referred as Mediterranean climates, but I call them Kumeyaay climates, because our traditional territories are the ocean, mountain, and desert. So it should explain what I'm talking about when I say it's a Kumeyaay climate. It's a very biodiverse climate. And I bring these things up because it's the language that really we lean on. Good fire, cultural fire, prescribed fire. It tells us what kind of perspective we're coming from. So I just wanted to reflect on how important our language is when we're talking about this, but even culturally, how important our language as Matao depicts our active cultural revitalization. I'm able to introduce myself in that way fully because of those language immersions. And not only does our language hold the definition, Hauka meaning hello, but it also holds a spiritual and significance of you're acknowledging the fire within, breaking down the how and the ka. So just wanted to reflect on the language culturally, but also contemporarily, how we use the given language of English or Spanish in some of our areas, because we are Northern Baja, California, Mexico. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Emily. I wanted to jump over to Joel real quick to talk about some of the benefits of good fire on our plant relatives, right, in our environment, and the effects that's having on the drought that we've been in for the last, I don't know, couple hundred years, seems like. Here in California, it's a big issue. So I know that that Joel and working on his own property, he's been able to see a lot of changes and be able to implement a lot of our traditional practices with plants, animals, and so yeah, please, Joel.
Yeah, so I know for a lot of our Western science partners, we have the concept of fire adaptation, right? And plants being fire obligates, being fire adapted. In our worldview, the way we see it is these are our relatives that we grew up with, that raised us, that we learned from, and they have carried these traits, and they have worked and intertwined with us in different roles and responsibilities, depending on our worldview, where we come from. For our Payamkuish people, we have we have different trees that come from the mountains who agreed to be responsible for being water vessels, for being food sources, for being energy sources. There was a lot of talk earlier about protecting and working on brushland, scrubland, and in our worldview, these are used for energy resources. You know, so a lot of accompanying, keeping the brush from coming down and taking over different areas was managed by us using them for our heating, for our cooking, for making our tools, things like that. It's still used today, but at a very small rate, much slower now. And so, what was your question? You keep asking. What was it?
No,
Just get to it.
I think that's
The
part of the
benefit
list
of it, right?
of benefits, right?
Yeah.
The benefits that we are seeing on the land, on our own, reservations has been tremendous, has been inspiring. So I think that we would like is for you all to come and support us in continuing to implement our traditional knowledge and our traditional knowledge practices on the land. And again, that is predicated on us establishing a trust relationship,
Yeah.
right? Because we know that you have your own set of skills and resources, and we want to bring those together and couple them with ours And so I'm going to go to Kevin Solon next, talk a little bit about what the Palma Band of Mission Indians are doing on their reservation and also in their forest. I actually live there myself. So yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. Will appreciate that very much. I've been sitting here thinking about what would Cliff say if he were here? And first thing he would say is undoubtedly fire is the missing practice from the landscape. Despite millions, billions of dollars being pumped into these restoration treatments. I mean, mechanical thinning, brushing, it only goes so far. Fire really is the missing component, and reintroducing it back onto the landscape is really gonna kind of help seal the deal. Kind of on a positive note, well, I should say before the positive note, another thing Cliff would say, um, forgive me for saying, but he'll often tell me that, you know, Palomar Mountain, the north summit of Palomar Mountain, is where the mission reserve is at. And Cliff will often tell me, he's like, this is where you people chase my people. So this is the last area that was really last burned. I mean, they weren't able to burn their homelands. So last week, kind of happy to report, I finished off the tail end of a 326 acre CAL FIRE forest health project. We put some fire back on the landscape. It was great. There's about 800 piles, each of them the size of a school bus that needs burning. We got 50 piles burned, but we also did some broadcast burning. So it was a really good success story, I think. And kind of capping all of that off, it was under the direction of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Ramon Gomez was out there, and then weird to say, shadowing under him was Chief Wes here. And then Nate from Viejas was getting some experience as an igniter boss. So it was really kind of helping to reintroduce these practices back onto the landscape. So yeah, some good success there. And capping that off, you know, we just finished the forest health project, but was awarded a tribal wildfire resiliency grant last fall. So that's going to balloon the footprint out by another 100 acres. And then fingers crossed with some funding from FEMA that we applied for, that'll balloon it out another 275 acres. So the footprint has grown quite substantially over the last few years. And then monitoring all of this work, we're mapping it with a high resolution multispectral camera every 2 weeks. That coincides with contractor billing, so we can keep track of when and where work was done. And then we also have some really cool imagery to quantify short-term treatment efficacy and yeah, for other long-term monitoring purposes. And kind of the capstone gem project I think that's going on right now is through San Diego State University. It's part of the Collaborative of Native Nations for Climate Transformation and Stewardship, CONNECTS. So we're connecting people back to the land. And that's another thing Cliff will say is how connecting elders and specifically the tribal youth back to the land. How do we inspire these kids to get them to want to work with us? It's really difficult. So we're building a nature trail system up there. So it's going to weave through all of the different project areas. I know Will and Joel are going to be assisting with some planting, so we can have some native plant gardens up there. So the trails will kind of take you to, you know, different areas of the projects, and you know, hopefully opening up some historical trails as well.
You know what else Cliff would say? You talk too much, Kevin.
Oh.
Hey.
Yes, he did.
And then he'd go, hey. So that,
He said that last Friday.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think, you know, can't speak enough about the work that's being done on the mountain there with the Palma tribe. And most significantly, I think, is that for the first time, multiple tribal bands, multiple nations came together. And I was lucky enough to be up there to see these different fire crews from the different reservations. So different tribal members coming together to do the same project, to put fire on the ground in a good way. And just like our ancestors did. And I really think that's the goal, right? We want to be able to do that not only on the reservation lands, but on all lands, BLM, forestry, county, private, right? We gotta have that goal. We gotta work towards that. And so there are, you know, a lot of headway being made right now. I'm happy to report, you know, that in our Southern California neck of the woods, we're moving full forward with the intention and with the motivation and following in the footsteps of our northern relatives, folks up in the central and northern California that have been doing it and have been telling us, we can do it, you can do it too, and we'll show you. And so I've been up in Mariposa area above Fresno and been learning cultural burning from a man named Chairman Ron Good. I don't know if anybody knows Chairman Good, but yes, he is a powerhouse and heavy hitter cultural burner as well, like folks up here who have made it their responsibility and their life's passion to pass that knowledge on. And I can remember a quote from Dr. Stan in Matau saying, you know, that knowledge, and if it's not passed on and shared, it's not knowledge. So that's what we're all saying here in various ways. And I want to go to my good friend and colleague Travis Armstrong, who we're both archaeologists. We both work for multiple tribes doing cultural resource management. And so, I mean, you can elaborate on your experiences working with tribes and also your role in CAL FIRE now.
Sure. But to start, I have a question for Emily because you mentioned agencies and I detected like some dissatisfaction there. I was wondering, you know, if you could talk about like how, because there's all these agency folks here, like, well, what can we all do better to help you, you
You
know?
want to answer that question? Because it's going to be a long-winded answer.
All right, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So really, what I wanted to highlight is the importance of tribal sovereignty and the right to implement that. So there are great things happening, right? We heard about it all day. Southern montane forests, this task force, all kinds of good things. However, like I mentioned, when I started talking, you find yourself, or cultural practitioners, tribal governments find themselves still having to include themselves, invite themselves, of course, prioritize themselves. And I reflected on the systems that we all benefit off of and stand on, because those systems are founded on genocide. And when we don't include the tribal governments or the cultural practitioners, we're implementing and continuing that genocide. We're choosing to not include tribal nations. We're choosing to not uplift the original stewards of these lands. We're choosing to stand on the authority in which we're given with the statehood of genocide. So I sat on a panel similar to this, had a few more relatives, but it was a cultural fire practitioner panel, which the La Jolla Band held a traditional cultural burn workshop. I don't know the full title, but you get the gist. And it prioritized CAL FIRE with the component of including the community, but they were not the priority, unfortunately, because the funding did come from CAL FIRE. So, you know, it went great. It did. Got to meet Len in person. We've been, you know, meetings all year, and it was a good opportunity. But then I found myself that summer having to deal with having to deal with our family being criminalized for being cultural practitioners. So again, this is the lived experience as a cultural practitioner. We've been hearing about all the good that's been happening all day, but there's a thing called intention and the thing called action. That we intend to do good, but sometimes our actions don't always end up that way. So that's what I wanted to mention is, sure, we all intend to do great work. We all intend to collaborate, but what are our actions when we intend to do that? What are the results? What are the lived experiences of the people we're claiming to have partnerships with? And I say that as somebody who is often tokenized as a tribal partner, unfortunately. So my family found, so if Forrest, if you wanted to share that photo, I would like to introduce you to my father. His name is Davey Elliott. And, you know, for everybody with a badge on, look away because this is a crime right here. This is what we call implementing tribal sovereignty. This is a cultural burn without any permits, without any institutional reign on how we do it. This is our family's land that my grandma stewarded, and he stewards in the same way. He's been burning since he was 7. He's 68. He's going to be 68 this year. So he's been burning for 60 years. Cultural burning has never left Kumeyaay land. Never has left Kumeyaay land. So this is a free burn, what I like to call free burn or a sovereign burn, to give you some more new language. This is how he taught me, with just being on the land. Of course, there's so many logistics that go into it, right? But we won't put it on a piece of paper like we're required to, because it's in here in our heart and it's in our mind and it's in our actions. So before he puts the fire down to the ground, before he puts that prayer down to the ground, he does his due diligence and inspecting the area, inspecting the conditions. So it's not, you know, although we are, yes, savages, he is not savagely out there burning, right? He is very much an expert. He's very much a scientist. He doesn't have those qualifications, that certificate, to make you all comfortable in allowing, you know, him to do what he does. But unfortunately, on July 4th, he was arrested and criminalized for being a cultural practitioner. He was arrested for doing what we've been doing on these lands since time immemorial. The first thing, one of the first things that the conquistadors seen when they came along the coastline here on Kumeyaay land were fire. And they were controlled fires, or what, you know, we understand as controlled fires. Not only was it land management, it was communication, it was ceremony, it was a lot of things than what we're talking about here today. It was a relationship. And that relationship was affected by the genocide in which we all stand on, unfortunately, right? Even I stand on that as a Kumeyaay woman. I have the opportunity and the responsibility to move away from that genocide, to refuse to assimilate more than I already am. So just wanted to mention that. He unfortunately, you know, he had a nice little life there. So it was a third strike. And he was about to go to jail for 25 years for practicing his culture. That's what we were dealing with last year. And it was very hard as a family, especially since he has dementia, especially since he has heart conditions. I can't even imagine what my mom went through. I only have an idea. Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about, but this is our lived experience as cultural practitioners, as people who have kept the knowledge here on the land, not necessarily in the institutions or in the books, but within our family and on the land. This is something we're still dealing with. Thankfully, we're as stubborn as he is, he agreed to, what is it called? Plea deal. So he's on probation for a year for practicing his culture. He had to pay the court fines for practicing his culture. He has to provide a certificate of completion surrounding a workshop around fire for practicing his culture. What I didn't mention was, not only does he have 60 years of cultural knowledge, he was also a firefighter. So he does have that agency side of things, knowledge. He was a hot shot. So it was a very unfortunate experience as a Kumeyaay woman, as a daughter of a cultural burner. But instead of allowing that to, you know, weigh us down as a family, we're growing with it. We're choosing to, since he's unable to burn for a year, we're choosing to do that for him because he can't. He'll go to jail. And with the certification, I'm creating a Kumeyaay Fire workshop so that he can have that certificate. So there are some good that came out of it in a sense. And, but unfortunately, yeah, it was something that shouldn't have happened. And, this is my first time talking about it publicly to the public. And, I just want you all to hear, you know, what we experience here in Southern California is being criminalized. Um, I'll end shortly, but within our culture, there's not one aspect of it where you need a certification except for fire. So I just wanted to highlight that you don't have to have a certificate to sing our songs, speak our language, to cook our foods, to steward the land, but you do need a certification or qualification in a sense, for fire. And why is that? It's because of the systems that require that certification is founded on genocide. It's founded on fire suppression, which is ultimately cultural suppression, in our experience of it. Yes, there are there are occurrences where that fire suppression is obviously needed with wildfires. But why are those wildfires even there? So just keep asking those questions, and I'll just pause there because I can keep going.
Yay, Han. Han. Yeah, go ahead and follow up, Marlene.
So I just want to say Nishun Lovik to Emily for sharing that and, you know, your strengths, because it's really critical to speak on, you know, and I'll just call it out. These agencies aren't educated about what we do as cultural burners. The agency is who arrested her father. So what is it that the state's doing to require that CAL FIRE, USFS, and your agencies have these refresher trainings on culture fire every year and are obligated to be educated? And it's not a choice because we don't have a choice. We have to do NWCG requirements every year, even if we don't want to, whoever's land we're on. And so we don't have good relationships with CAL FIRE in Southern California. And I'm going to call that out because it's been since I was a child. My grandfather has been harassed. I've been harassed, clearly what Emily shared. So these staff and CAL FIRE folks who are standing in the back that I see, you know, it's really a call out. We've had cultural fire convenings where our folks from CAL FIRE in Southern California didn't show up, but Len was there. And Len's not from Southern California. So what are we doing from the state to make sure that y'all's people are educated and doing these trainings where you're working with traditional ecological knowledge practitioners, where you're working with Native scholars, community members to help make these trainings so that your agency folks are also getting the historical information and current information on cultural burning, but also the historical background of the genocide and killing of our people. I think a lot of us know here that the state was founded on this. I mean, even the first governor said that you could shoot and kill an Indian on site if we were caught practicing our culture or burning. And I think a lot of the time, an advisor of mine who I look up to, Kutcher Riesling Baldy, she always says that her uncle told her, the reason why you're here is because a settler was a bad shot. And so it's really critical. There's a lot of harm that's being done by these agencies to our people. And that's what we're seeing in real time right now. So what is it that we're doing to really, you know, close those gaps, but also protect our people? And also, what are the legal ramifications for our people and support that we have? Because we have these bills that came out, say SB 310 and 322, and yet Emily's father was arrested. There was no liability for him. And also, right, how is it that he was a firefighter with the same qualifications, but how are our most vulnerable community members protected? I mean, he has dementia, heart problems, but yet he is a firefighter and he was still arrested. So that means none of us are protected when we're out trying to do what we do. We could be arrested at any point in time. And it's just a matter of what agency person's going to show up that doesn't know us, that doesn't know our people, that doesn't know our history, our practices, and are automatically just going to write us off. We've dealt with a lot of racism in this county, and it's really important to call that out. You know, it's great that all these things are being spoken about today, and we really are looking forward to the future where we can work together because at the end of the day, it's for all of our next generations. where we're sitting at right now, you know, the witch fire came through here, Pamacha fire, when we were young, and we're seeing all these wildfires come through. But had any of these agencies reached out to our tribal peoples, had they actually listened to the way that we wanted to manage, maybe some of these urban interfaces would have been saved from these major catastrophic wildfires that we saw. But now we're catching up. We're late, as we all know. So what are we doing right now to make sure that we're correcting those actions? And where's the money coming from the state to support that, and also support like our crews and legal ramifications for our community members who are being arrested? Thank you.
Yeah, so now you see why I said these are my teachers here. You know, they're here to impart knowledge to you. So I hope that you see them that way too. Because it's hard to be up here and to express yourself in that way, you know. But these are our traumatic daily lives. This is what we're dealing with on a daily basis as Native people, as sovereign people. And so when we come into the spaces and we're able to connect with folks on that type of level, we think good things are going to happen, right? So we need to continue these conversations. We need to continue to break down these institutional barriers, to rethink how fire is perceived in the general public and by the agencies, that fire is a good thing. It's been here since time immemorial, since the beginning of the world and the universe. And we have that knowledge, and that knowledge is being practiced. It's being practiced despite the atrocities and despite the, marginalization of our people ongoing, and so now the ball's in your court. Now that you've heard this, you're beholden to it. So all you folks that work for the agencies, nonprofits, land trusts, now you have the ball is in your court. Now you have to do something with it, right? And the great thing is that we're here to help. We're here to make that new connection moving forward. So I don't know how much time we have left. I mean, we covered a lot. 50 more minutes? Okay. Let's go to Travis real quick. and then-
Sorry, Emily, that you had to deal with, your family had to deal with all of that. A couple of things from Cal Fire's perspective. I mean, Len Nielsen, who is the departing tribal liaison, couldn't be here today, but I'm sure he's watching this. But we just did hire a new deputy director of tribal relations, Helen Lopez. So I'm sure she'll be reaching out to a lot of you people, in the future. And one thing I'm working on is, I say, reinvigorating our Native American Advisory Council. So maybe in the future, there'll be some avenues for people to come and talk, But I want to say, Cal Fire is like, people think of it as Cal Fire, this, this massive organization, and it is, but it's also like 21 units. There's North and South region, there's Sacramento, and there are all these people. And, the state passes a law and it's like, oh, well, now you're required to do this. From a tribal point of view, it's like, well, why aren't you doing it? Because it's the law and they should be doing it, but every unit has its own character, and San Diego unit has its own character and priorities. So it's like constant, making these connections and relationships, and then people leave. But I think it's getting better from my time at Cal Fire before than it is, before it is today. But there's a lot of work to be done, and Emily's story is like, one of those tragic stories that shows how much work has to be done.
Thank you, Travis. Open up to the executive board or folks.
Thank you. So I'll turn it over. Folks, any thoughts, comments, questions?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the panel. Emily, I'd heard a little bit of this from folks earlier about the situation, but I appreciate you sharing that publicly here because it's an important point. We've worked hard within the state with tribal practitioners to develop Senate Bill 332 and AB 642 so that we could be in a place to do this burning, right? We've got the strategic plan for the beneficial use of fire that, goal 3, is really specifically focusing on things. And one of the things that I keep getting asked about is, this one element in there is supporting tribal sovereignty. Tribal sovereignty is not just about, tribal governments, and no disrespect to tribal governments, in that, but it's also about respecting the sovereignty of individuals as tribal practitioners. And so there's still work to be done because there's, people trying to learn, in that space. How do we do this? Because there are new things, right? There's new relationships being built and, problems. I would say that like in the Good Fire reports, which I referenced earlier, Good Fire 1 and Good Fire 2, some of these barriers are discussed there, some of the things that are holding us back from being able to actually do things at the scale. And agency turnover is one of those things that's brought up quite a bit. So I just kind of put that out there for us to think about. I guess one thing that maybe wasn't mentioned, and I get this question a lot from folks outside of tribal community, is why aren't tribes doing more burning on tribal land? And I know Chief Ruiz, you've dealt with this quite a bit. Can you talk a little bit about that in just as a kind of a challenges that you experience working on your tribal lands?
Well, again, it's, dealing with the government and having to have what's been said here is, permit systems, qualified people, and then the knowledge itself too, but, I always reach out to those, other agencies to assist us, but, yeah, and it's, dealing with, the BIA. And as we started this, probably 4 years ago, where we've gotten into where we are today, there's a lot of questions asked as to how do we go about doing a lot of this stuff we do? Because there's people like Marlena here that want to burn and all that. And it's the non-agency folks. How do we get the non-agency folks involved? Do they have to be red carded? Do they have to be this? So they have to have all that? No, they shouldn't have to, is, again, is what we're saying here. And that's the rub there, is just trying to simplify things to what it used to be. But because of the red tape, all that, in my career, it took me years to get to where I was just because of training and lack of funding for training. So it took years for me to have to jump through all those hoops, go to all those classes, and then become a trainee. And then once I was on the ground burning, and again, I just burned for, for other reasons than the cultural stuff on the forest land. And then I hadn't done anything back home much because we couldn't, like say, so at the least I would go down, and this is something I've told a few people before, all that I just did or said, all those years. But anybody that owns property that cuts brush and piles it in their backyard can go down to the nearest Cal Fire's fire station, get a permit, and burn that pile with no experience whatsoever, right? That's going on today. And there's even a website now where you can get a permit on the website. I don't think they even come out and visit and look at your pile anymore like they used to see if you're in compliance. So that's a big difference there. So how does that work? But yet we have to jump through all these hoops to do the same exact thing and have all these things. I just cut down quite a few trees to create the IAP for the burn we did last week. And I made, made a kind of a joke of it during the briefing that morning at Palma. I said, the reason why you don't see a lot of trees up here is because all the paper it took to create this IAP and the maps and all that, right? And that's what it comes down to. It is, that's just a part of it. So it is, we're being held back from doing what everybody else, like I say, at that lowest scale, lowest level of experience, going down and getting a burn permit and burning piles in your backyard. It's totally different, right? Or is it?
To answer your question, from my perspective, I think it ultimately is the priority of the tribe. Who, if you don't have somebody who has the priority, the momentum to do this work, to have these relationships with the land, then it's not going to get done. So I made it a priority to bring back the fire to my reservation. The photos and the burn that you've seen was on my dad's reservation in Manzanita in East County. And so I grew up seeing it all my life there. And now as an adult, I'm choosing to bring it back to where I live in San Isabel, where I am from. They used to burn in the 90s. It kind of faded out because that individual, Rodney Kephart, who was a fireman at the time, he stopped. So this photo is from Matetami, which is a community garden I developed in January 2020 on the San Isabel Reservation, and held a small pile burn. As you can see, the fire here is a pile now, because when you bring something back, you have to do it in a way that people are comfortable with when we're talking about the culture. So I meant, the comfortable, or the requirements of my, you know, fire chief and his recommendations, really, because we don't have, at that time, we didn't have, any requirements as to a permit. What I did was just have that relationship with my fire chief and have that line of communication, call him. I asked him to come and join, and he said, yeah, we'll go and we'll burn for you. And I said, no, we'll burn. You'll be there though, and you're invited, and you're welcome to come and see how it's done. And I invited Wes, and that's where I got to meet Jolene for the first time, was when they came on this day, and my cousin Teresa in the back was there too. So it was a good day. They invited the tribal youth to come out, and they came out and helped us with the prayer and the start of the fire. And then they got a little bored, so they just, they were playing around and they left. So, because as we all know, the fire takes time. Most good things do. And so, yeah, this is just, having it as a priority, really. And I was able to share the CAL FIRE Forest grant with my council, and they made it a priority and were awarded, that grant opportunity. And now they're actively working towards strengthening our forest on the top of the mountain with, these resources that are being made available from the state. So that is a great outcome, and it's in the development stages, and I look forward to it and pray on it often. And then, so just wanted to quickly mention, I did mention the Kumeyaay Fire Workshop, which was the outcome from, the unfortunate occurrence last year. It's a positive outcome, and it's going to be a space that will prioritize cultural knowledge only. So a lot of these trainings have, the agency side of things, which is awesome. And our intention is to create a space that only prioritizes the cultural significance and teaching. And that's what this Kumeyaay Fire Workshop will be. It's being developed, planned by us, funded by us, and it's for us, and will be taught by us, as well as implemented by us. So it's all about implementing our sovereignty, really. And this is one form of doing that. And we will be making space for that element of acknowledging the importance of including the agencies. It won't be the focus, but it will be acknowledged, because we all know the importance of collaboration with this work. So it will be mentioned and touched on, but it's not going to be the priority. And then now, as the chairwoman for the Kumeyaay Degeno Land Conservancy, I find myself now being asked to provide training, like agency training for my people who are interested. So I'm learning how to develop that plan, or strategic way of how to go about that, because I don't know how to do that. I only know how to teach my culture in these ways. So learning how to provide space, and yeah, those prerequisites are killer. So trying to find out how to provide, support with that. But just wanted to mention that we are actively creating space for cultural knowledge, and as well as the agency, side of things as well. So that's all I wanted to mention.
Marlena?
Yeah, so, where I live at and where my family's land on is well, one of the places, is it on the Rincon Reservation. And we actually live by a major highway. And so what's really difficult is, our tribal folks know when we're out burning piles, know what we're doing, or burning under our oaks there. But the greater community is so scared of wildfire that they're constantly calling, on us constantly. So I think that's a big gap too, is educating the greater public as well as these agencies about what cultural fire is and about good smoke, because there is good smoke and there is good fire. I think one of the other things that we run into also, just in general, and I wanted to speak on this earlier, was, our foods and our people. The health of the land is the health of our people. If we don't have food or protected our food sovereignty, like we talked a lot about here, our oak trees are being infested with the golden spotted oak borer. We're losing so many oak trees every day. That's 80% of our diets as so-called California Indian people. It's not the only thing we eat. Everything else is also fire adapted. And we're seeing the overgrowth of fuels taking over our foods, right? With climate change, all different seasons changing. We're also having to learn on the seasons changing on when we can go out and get stuff. But it's critical that we culturally burn our oak trees. It's critical that we culturally burn our foods. And if we don't have those things, then we as a people are no longer going to exist. So that is something that's really critical. And I think, sorry, it's a little bit off of your question, Dawn, but that was something that I wanted to mention that I know we didn't speak on quite yet.
Yeah, thank you. One other thing I wanted to mention really quickly, it's just as important though, is to the continual revitalization of our good fire traditional burning practices is the movement land back. Has anybody heard of that? Yeah, land back. It's a big deal. Thank you. Because what land back entails is putting land back in the hands of the First Nation people, of our people to steward, to propagate, to revitalize, to put fire on the ground. It's something that's happening throughout the state. Right now, it just, minimally, but tribes all over, both federally and non-federally recognized tribes, are receiving lands, which was originally theirs, right? In order to develop a long-term a climate adaptation and resource revitalization plan. And so that entails of what we've been talking about, up here in the panel is it entails having trainings, but more traditionally oriented, where traditional knowledge is being passed to the community. It's one of the things that was hindered for the last couple hundred years is the oral tradition of elders imparting the knowledge to the youth to continue that knowledge and continue that practice. So fire was greatly impacted by that. Our language was greatly impacted by that. And so what we're having to do is try to scrape up a few dollars here and there in order to create a space that will facilitate this traditional knowledge transfer, right? And so that's another important caveat of bringing fire back to the land, and also developing collaborative long-term relationships with key folks in the agencies. So we need your help on doing that. We need your ideas. We need your strengths. We need your skills. And I hope that you've taken note of what we've suggested here. There's a lot of solutions that were presented today. And after the panel, make sure that you come up and, if anything, shake our hand, continue the conversation, exchange information, because we're willing to continue this relationship and this much needed critical dialogue that's been long overdue. And so with that, yeah, Emily, go ahead.
No, I'm really happy that Will brought up the land back, and I just wanted to give a quick some context, because for folks who may be familiar and those who aren't familiar, it can be seem a little daunting or even overwhelming. The fact that, giving land back. And so sometimes I'll share like rematriation, that word, because what we're doing is we are bringing back that matriarchal way of doing things, that society, that medicine from our women, because we are the, what do you say? We are the backbone of our people. Without our women, without that balance of that matriarchal woman, as you all have mothers or grandmothers or aunties that you go to when you, as men or women or they need that support, that guidance. It's usually a woman, that can provide that healing or that understanding or just that love and nurturing a lot of times. So I just wanted to shed a little bit of light. I hope I didn't offend nobody while I was up here on anything that I said. And if I did, I'll pray for you. Thank you.
Hey.
Will, thank you. I want to turn to my colleague here for any thoughts and words that you want to share.
Thank you. Sitting here today has been some deep reflection. And Emily, thank you for lightening it there at the very end. To Marlene and Emily, thank you for sharing your lived experiences with us. And to the rest of the panel, thank you for sharing that as well. It is hard as the director of CAL FIRE to sit and hear that you have next to no relationship with my organization in Southern California. And for that, I'm sorry. For my CAL FIRE employees in the room, you shouldn't step back. You shouldn't be offended by what you heard today. You should reflect upon that and you should engage upon that. You just heard how our tribal members feel about you in Southern California, and we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of relationships to mend. We provide presentations that talk about to our employees that talk about relationships are built on trust and change is based on relationships. And so we can't ever get there until we're able to build trust, and building trust is being inclusive and looking at the perspectives and understanding culture. I thank my CAL FIRE employees for being here and hearing this today. I thank you for representing your unit. As I reflect back in an expectation I gave in 2022, it was my expectation that your unit chiefs were here, but none of them are here. And I will address that. I look forward to building this relationship. I look forward to recognizing the progress that we need to make. I'm going to step back just for a moment. In the state of California has really traditionally been known in 3 jurisdictional areas regardless of the agency: local responsibility area, state responsibility area, and federal responsibility area. But you don't hear anywhere in there about our sovereign nations, about trust land, about allotments, and about fee land. Land in which it is a sovereign nation and our tribes have the right to do as they please on those lands. I will turn it back to something that is perhaps even more reflecting, and it's with my partner next to me, and that we balance acres across the state. And so I'll give you this perspective. While the state may protect federal land, or federal partners may protect state land as the protecting agency, neither agency ever gives up their jurisdictional authority. And we need to see that the same way in our sovereign nations. So, a lot of reflection. As I said, it's deep. I appreciate the discussion today. Thank you to the panel and for moderating.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Really, I'll follow to that deep appreciation. Again, Emily, thank you. Marlena, I so appreciate all of the panels, but thoughts on what are we doing on training our people, on having cultural awareness, making sure that we have the reciprocity that you're doing. So thank you for that. There's the trust that you said, trust responsibilities that we have with you as sovereign nations, as the federal side of that. One thing, three things that I'd share. Thank you for sharing the language. It is the sacredness is now fear. And how do we switch that? How do we turn fear into, we're calling it good fire, but I bet you never had, or maybe never had a bad fire, or had to call fire good or bad. So how do we move to that state together on that? Intention to action. That was another one. That's certainly add. We need to follow up on that. And then also we have a long way to go. So I so appreciate all of you. Thank you for giving us so much today. Thank you very much. We're going to close this one out. I appreciate that. Okay.